It was a frigid New Year's Eve in 2025. Sarah sat alone in her modest apartment, anxiously waiting for her husband, James, to return home. He had been working as a teacher in a town 50 miles away for nearly a year, and tonight was supposed to be their reunion. Money had been tight for Sarah, and she'd stretched every last penny James had sent her. Now, with New Year's around the corner, she was counting on his paycheck to finally ease their struggles. New Year's Eve was an important holiday for Sarah, not just for the celebration, but also for the tradition. Back in her hometown, families would prepare feasts filled with symbolic foods, hoping to start the year with abundance and happiness. Sarah dreamed of recreating that tradition this year, if only the money James earned would cover it. As the hours dragged on, Sarah grew worried. She checked her phone, but there were no messages from James. Outside, the snow piled high, and the wind howled through the streets. Just as she was about to give up hope, she heard footsteps crunching through the snow. She flung open the door to find James, his face red from the cold, shaking snow off his coat. "You're late," she exclaimed, both relieved and annoyed. James stepped inside, warmed his hands by the heater, and gratefully accepted a bowl of hot soup. As he sipped, Sarah cut straight to the point. "How was the year? Did you get paid?" James hesitated, his hands tightening around the bowl. "It was a good year," he said carefully. "I got paid. Well, thank goodness for that. Let's put the money somewhere safe and I'll make us some tea." James sighed, avoiding her eyes. "About the money." Sarah froze. "What do you mean, about the money?" I gave it away," James admitted quietly. "You did what?" Sarah's voice shot up. "Please, let me explain," James said, trying to calm her. "It happened on my way home. I was walking through the snow, thinking about how happy you'd be when I got back. Then I saw someone, a woman, running toward the river." "A woman? At the river? What are you talking about?" Sarah asked, confused. James took a deep breath and recounted the story. Earlier that evening, as James walked home, his thoughts were filled with anticipation. In his bag was his entire year's salary, and he couldn't wait to surprise Sarah. But as he passed the riverbank, he spotted a woman sobbing, her shoulders shaking as she stood dangerously close to the icy water. Alarmed, James rushed over and gently pulled her away. "Let me go," she cried. "What's wrong?" James asked, his voice full of concern. The woman, who introduced herself as Emily, explained through tears that her landlord was threatening to evict her and sell her daughter if she couldn't pay the rent by morning. Her husband had been missing for months, and she had no one to turn to. James hesitated, his heart aching for her. He thought about Sarah, waiting at home, and about their own struggles. But looking at Emily, he couldn't bring himself to walk away. "I'll help you," he said finally. Reaching into his bag, he pulled out his entire paycheck and handed it to her. Emily stared at him in disbelief. "I can't take this," she whispered. "You must," James insisted. "Use it to save your daughter and yourself." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she thanked him repeatedly. She disappeared into the night, clutching the money tightly. "So, you gave her everything?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "I couldn't just walk away," James said. "And now we have nothing. What are we supposed to do for New Year's? Starve?" "I'll figure something out," James promised, though he sounded unsure. The next day, James went around the neighborhood, humbly asking if anyone could lend them money or food for the holiday. Most doors were closed in his face. Finally, an elderly neighbor handed him a small bundle, but when James opened it, he found only a few potatoes and some scraps. Exhausted and defeated, he returned home to Sarah, who was still furious. "You're a fool, James," she said, "but if we have to eat potatoes, we'll eat potatoes. Just don't expect me to be happy about it." That evening, James went out to a nearby field to gather more potatoes. The field belonged to a widow, Mrs. Liu, and her teenage son Eric, who had decided to guard the crops from potential thieves. As James quietly dug up potatoes, Eric, hidden nearby, watched with amusement. Eric recognized James and decided to play a trick. Grabbing a handful of potatoes, he tossed them at James, who yelped in surprise. "Thank you, Buddha," James whispered, thinking the potatoes were some kind of divine intervention. Eric couldn't contain his laughter, and eventually revealed himself. "Relax, Mr. James. I'm just messing with you." Embarrassed but grateful, James explained his situation. Eric, moved by the story, helped him gather enough potatoes to last for several days. The next morning, Mrs. Liu and Eric showed up at James and Sarah's door with a basket of food. "Happy New Year," Mrs. Liu said warmly. "We heard about what you did for that woman and her daughter. You have a kind heart, Mr. James." As they sat together, sharing a simple meal of potatoes and vegetables, Emily arrived with her daughter and husband. "Mr. James," she said, tears in her eyes, "we've come to thank you. Your kindness saved us." For the first time in days, James and Sarah smiled. Despite their struggles, they realized they had something far more valuable than money: compassion, community, and the promise of a better year ahead. Happy New Year!
Wow, what an incredible story. It's amazing how a single act of kindness can ripple out and transform lives. Now I want to hear from you. In this amazing story, you learned new English vocabulary and phrases, storytelling techniques for better fluency. The importance of empathy in daily life. Imagine you're in James's shoes. What would you do? Or if you were Emily, how would you show your gratitude? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your words could inspire someone else to see the world differently. And remember, every story you read, listen to, or tell brings you closer to fluency in English. That's why here at Story Fluent, we make learning English more than just grammar. It's about stories, emotions, and human connections. Don't forget to like this video if it touched your heart and hit that subscribe button for more inspiring tales every week. Let's grow fluent, one story at a time.